Good morning, YouTube. Today, I want to talk all about some of the misconceptions about buying supercars.
Can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan and this is my garage, and this channel is all about the supercar ownership experience, maintenance, owning these cars, buying these cars, selling these cars, and even just driving them. If you happen to have a supercar and you're interested in selling it, go visit my website, normalguysupercar.com, and you can actually list your car for free. Also, I offer some consulting services for those of you that are looking to buy or sell a supercar. If you need some help figuring out what you want to do, what's the right car for you, things like that, reach out to me. We can get in touch and figure out some way to help you. But today, I want to tell you all about some of these misconceptions about buying supercars because, oh boy, people have lots of strange ideas. There's a lot of myths and weird stuff that goes on with these cars. As always, we've got the shop dog Mo with us today. Hey Mo, what you doing? What you doing? You behaving? Huh? You behaving? Yeah. So when people start researching a particular car of interest, one thing that comes up is you'll see lots of owners. People are scared of supercars that have lots of owners, and I actually think it's completely pointless. So here's the thing about supercar ownership is that most people don't own these cars for very long. Now, why is that? I'm not entirely sure. I think the average ownership of these cars is about 2 to 3 years, that's it. Especially when they're new. So a lot of these people will buy them new, and they just want whatever is the latest and greatest, so they tend to go through a lot of cars. My first Ferrari I only owned for about 3 or 4 years. So the only major advantage of having a car that has few owners is you might know the history better, especially if you can actually talk to the owner themselves. But obviously if you're talking to a dealership, it kind of almost doesn't matter at all who owned it or how many people owned it, because the history is going to be either there or not there on paper, and you're not going to be talking to the owner themselves, so it's almost irrelevant. So in that respect, I personally give it almost no weight to know how many owners the car had. I don't think it's a big deal if the cars had 5, 6, even 7 owners, especially once they start becoming 15 or 20 years old. These cars may have changed hands many, many times. A lot of these people just want to buy the car to experience it for a little while, and then they move on and buy a different one. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't necessarily mean they abused it or they didn't maintain it properly or anything like that. That needs to come from other sources. You need to verify all of that information from something else. And that actually leads into another subject, which is the paper trail. You always hear about you gotta have this paper trail or proof of maintenance that's been done on these cars and things like that, and it's kind of not as true for the newer cars. So on the older cars, it does matter. On some of the older Ferraris, for example, the cars that needed the real major services where you have to pull out the engine and things like that, having a paper trail was very important because you need to know when was the last time these things were done, because if you don't know, then you have to assume that it needs those services and you're gonna have to pay a bunch of money. When you start talking about the 430, 458, California, 812, F12, all of the newer Ferraris, for example, and most McLarens and even some of the Lamborghinis, it doesn't really matter because these cars don't have the true major service like they used to. None of the engines are coming out, the transmissions aren't coming out, the clutches aren't being replaced every 50,000 miles or whatever. These cars are a lot more reliable. You do have some services and you certainly want to make sure that these things were maintained properly. But is having no paper trail on a modern Ferrari necessarily a deal breaker? I actually don't think so. For example, this car had 0 paperwork whatsoever, yet I still thought it was a good deal. The dealership I bought it from clearly reset the oil life indicator, but I'm pretty sure they didn't change the oil because the oil was black. Basically, if there's no paper trail, just don't trust that the services necessarily have been done. Verify things like the tires are okay, the brakes are okay, the coolant's good, the oil's good, those sorts of things, and then you're all set. Mo found something interesting. What was it? What'd you find? Huh? Something of interest? He just jams his nose in there. Look at that. Another big trend that's kind of come around lately is the CPO stuff. So everyone wants the certified pre-owned. And honestly, I don't know that that really brings a whole lot of value. Yes, a CPO could say that certain features of the car, certain things have been verified to be good, but if you have a paper trail or if you do your own due diligence, does it really matter? I'm not entirely sure. Is it worth paying a big premium for a CPO? No. Is it worth paying more for a CPO? Maybe. So that's where it starts to get a little bit wonky. You got to look at what they're actually checking out on the car. And again, it's kind of like trust but verify. Always make sure you're doing your own homework, you're doing your own due diligence. If you don't know enough about the mechanics of these cars, bring your own guy, hire someone, do your own due diligence, whatever you need to do to verify that these things are good. Moses has found a bug. So he is zoned in on one of those mosquito flies or whatever they're called. Here, let me help you. There. Oh no! You gonna get it? Another common misconception is that somehow the higher mileage cars are suddenly worthless or not good buys. If you've got a car that's got hundreds of thousands of miles and it wasn't maintained properly, okay, that's a problem. But you see people freaking out about these Ferraris that have 30,000 miles, sometimes even like 10 and 20,000 miles. Like, oh my God, it's got 20,000 miles. And it's like, what? Like, this is a baby. The car has barely been driven. So I'm actually of a different philosophy on this. I actually am more scared of the cars that only have like 3,000 miles or less. So when I was trying to buy my 458, I specifically looked for cars that had at least 10,000 miles. In fact, I was targeting 20,000 miles. This one had 16. The reason is these cars tend to have some stuff go wrong from the factory. It just seems to be the truth. If something's going to break, it tends to break in the first few thousand miles while they're still under warranty. Now, the cars that get bought and then go sit in a garage and never get driven, they just rot. And anything that was a defect from the factory may not have been exposed yet by actually driving the car. So long as they've been maintained in a reasonably good state, they're fine, especially the newer ones. Once you get to the older Ferraris, it's almost irrelevant because these cars just have been driven. It just doesn't matter anymore. If you want a lower mile car, you start paying extreme premiums for that. So it's totally not worth it unless you're trying to take the car to like concours or things like that. But for any of you looking for a driver's car, don't be afraid of high miles. It is absolutely in your interest to look for high mile cars because you can save a lot of money. Another thing is people get super scared about track use. Oh my God, this car was on the track. Oh, don't buy it. It got tracked. No, who cares about that? This car was tracked a lot. This is a one-owner car, part of me, and he tracked the crap out of this thing. He drove the shit out of it. And actually, I thought that was great because you know what that means? Anything that was going to break has already been broken and fixed. Doesn't mean that the car has been beat up or anything like that. These cars are meant to be driven hard. All these supercars were designed to be driven hard, to be driven fast, to be driven on tracks. So taking and doing what they were designed to do isn't beating on them. Does that mean that certain things could be more worn out? Yeah, potentially. But that's where, again, you do your own due diligence. Check on the brakes, check on the tires, check on the coolant, check on the oil. Yes, possibly some of the ball joints or the bushings could also be a little bit more worn because of track use, but none of these are things that are replaceable or easy to fix or even all that expensive. So if you find a car that's the right price and it's got some track use, don't let that scare you. In fact, just use it as an opportunity, as a negotiation point, if anything. That's what I would do. Ultimately, a lot of these things that might be perceived negatives, use it to your advantage when you're negotiating a price. Don't be afraid of it. In fact, I'm actually encouraged by the fact that this car was tracked and had some miles. What did you find? Ah, that's metal. Don't eat that. What? How did you find metal? Of course you found metal. No. Don't eat metal. So one of the most common misconceptions about buying supercars is that you gotta pay cash. Almost no one pays cash for these cars. Yes, people do, okay? That does happen. The vast majority of supercars are financed. And so it's not a big deal. This isn't necessarily a statement of, oh, you can't afford it, you're financing. No, I mean, you still gotta be smart with your money. You still gotta make sure you can actually afford the car and afford all the maintenance and everything that comes with it. Figure out what sort of expenses you're getting into before you buy one of these cars. Financing, especially if the interest rates are low, in my opinion, is actually a very smart thing to do. I have enough money to be able to buy one of these. I chose not to because instead, I'm not tying up my cash, my liquid assets, and I can use them to produce more money than it would be worth putting it into this car. So I've gotten really, really low interest rates on these cars. Some of the financing on these, you can get really good interest rates, especially if you're going through something like a credit union. You can actually finance these just like any other used car. When I did my financing for my first Ferrari, all they cared about was that there was enough equity in the car. So I put about $20,000 down on that car. So that was enough where the bank felt comfortable that I'm not gonna just walk away from the car. So that's really what it comes down to, is if you're gonna buy one of these, put enough money down to make the bank comfortable, but then finance the rest if you have credit good enough and you can get a good enough interest rate. But if you have the cash and you wanna pay cash, great. I mean, that's your choice. You do what you want with your money. I'm not telling you what to do. For those of you that say, oh, I don't have a couple 100 grand laying around. Well, that's not a big deal. A lot of people don't. A lot of people do finance these cars. Just keep in mind that they are a depreciating asset. They also can take some expensive maintenance. Another interesting thing that comes up is insurance. People get all freaked out that they gotta buy collector's insurance, or they say, oh, you gotta go get an insurance policy that has like a predetermined value on the car. And it's actually not true at all, especially if you have something a little bit more common. Yes, if you have a very rare car, it probably is in your interest to have a declared value policy. But for those of us that have something a little bit more common, for example, the 458, there's a lot of these out there and there's a lot of comparable values. So if something were to happen to this car, it would be really easy for my insurance company to go out there and say, hey, this is an equivalent value for this car based on the market trends and so on and so on. I actually insure my car, my Ferrari, the same policy as I insure my wife's Mini. It is the exact same thing. They treat it just like it's a regular old car. That way I don't have any sort of mileage restrictions or any weird things like that. Yeah, some companies do get weird and they won't do a policy on these cars. And certainly once you start getting to the really expensive cars, they may not be interested in doing a policy on those cars at all. In fact, I actually talked to my insurance company and they said the highest they can do is $1 million. So if you have a car that's worth more than $1 million, they just won't cover you, period. So then you're obviously gonna have to get into some sort of specialty insurance. Another common misconception is that you need to buy one of these cars from a dealership, and that's totally bogus. There are plenty of individuals that are trying to sell these cars, and actually sometimes you can get a better deal because of that. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky though, is a lot of times the individuals have an emotional attachment to the car, and so they place a totally wrong value on it. Most of the time dealerships are pretty reasonable on their valuations, but I also believe a lot of the dealerships do mark up the cars a lot, especially if it's the same brand of the car. So for example, if you're trying to buy a Ferrari and you go to a Ferrari dealership, it's very common that that car will be marked up a little bit more because it's at a Ferrari dealership. Now, if you take and you go to a more generic dealership, for example, one that maybe just sells all sorts of supercars or all sorts of exotics or whatever, then you probably can get a better deal. In fact, this is how you can actually play a really interesting game, is you find the cars that are at a dealership that doesn't necessarily want a supercar. So for example, someone trades in one of these cars or somehow it ends up at like a, I don't know, like a Chevrolet lot or whatever, right? So they got all these Corvettes and all this SUVs and whatever and pickup trucks, and then there's a Ferrari there. And they're like, what the hell do we do with this Ferrari? So if you can swoop in and say, hey, you don't want to deal with that car, let me take it off your hands. A lot of times they just want to get rid of it. As long as they're net positive, they will dump that car fast. That is a great strategy. So if you can find it at a dealership that doesn't cater to supercars or exotics regularly, a lot of times you can get a good deal. On the converse of that, sometimes those car dealerships don't have any clue what these things are worth, and so they mark them up to crazy numbers, and then you can get nowhere. Be open to the idea of buying the car from wherever you can find the right car. If you find the right car and it's at the right price, it doesn't really matter who's selling it. Money talks, and you're gonna be able to get the right car. Okay, this one's gonna be a bit controversial, and I think a lot of people are gonna say they disagree with me in this, but I actually don't think a PPI is necessary.
What?
I know, right? Okay, so what is a PPI? A PPI is a pre-purchase inspection. And why is it that I'm saying that they're not necessary? Well, I guess I should say it kind of depends on the car and the age of the car. So for more modern Ferraris, for example, it kind of doesn't really matter. If you're talking about an older Ferrari, something like a 355 or a Testarossa, it might be more important to do that to make sure that the car has actually been maintained correctly. If you're going for a driver's car and you're going to actually put miles on this thing, it kind of doesn't really matter because a lot of the PPI stuff is really hit and miss. So I've seen a ton of PPIs now that have been helping out people and doing these consultations, and some of them are excellent. Some of these PPIs are amazing and worth every penny. Some of these PPIs are very expensive. Some of them are well over $1,000. I've even seen as much as $1,500. If you're gonna pay that much money, make sure you know what you're getting before you pay them. A lot of these PPIs are just crap. They just don't really check anything. They don't tell you anything new. I don't even think they hardly look at the car. Why are you paying a bunch of money to get a report that really tells you nothing about the car? Again, a great example is the PPI that was done on this car by someone else who was interested in it. I actually got a copy of it once I bought this car because it happened to be a viewer of my channel, and the PPI that was done on this car was just terrible. It was like yes, no answers. One of the questions was like, has there been paint work on the car? Yes. Okay, well, like, yeah, care to specify? Like, what sort of paint work? Was it because the whole car's been destroyed, or is it because there was a scratch or there was a rock chip? Make sure that if you get a PPI, again, see what they're gonna send you before you give them money. Make sure that they're actually gonna do something that provides you value. If that's something you want to do and you're willing to do, then that's fine. But the other possibility is just kind of check over the car yourself. You can verify a lot of these things yourself, and honest to God, these cars, the newer ones, are really quite good in just doing a test drive and being able to look around them and check things out. You can determine most of the things that could be wrong with it. So they don't tend to have these old scary problems like the older cars. Sometimes things can still go wrong, but ultimately it's just not as big a deal as it used to be. Find anything else, huh? What you doing? What? Getting bored, huh? You've been good. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm almost done filming. Almost done filming. Yeah, you're like ready for a nap. So my final thing is that these cars are well taken care of. It's actually not true. A lot of times you see the ads for these things and every single ad says the same thing. Oh, this thing's in immaculate condition. It's always immaculate, right? That's the word they always love to use. Or it's in perfect condition. Oh, it was super well taken care of and all this stuff. Oh, we got paperwork. And you go look at the car in person and oh my God, was this thing abused. The paint looks terrible. They're probably taking it through like drive-through car washes and stuff. The paint work is always the problem. The paint on these cars is very easy to get messed up. The swirl marks, all those sorts of problems are super common. So when they say it's immaculate or it's in perfect condition, be extremely skeptical because it's probably not. In fact, it's almost guaranteed not to be in perfect condition if they've been driven at all. These cars, yes, they will be in very good condition many times and certainly they'll look really clean, but don't trust that it's actually in immaculate condition. It's almost a joke, okay? They almost never are, especially the ones that really broadcast how perfect they are. Yeah, those are the ones you gotta really worry about. What did you find? Huh? Oh, hey, what is that? What is it? That sounds metal. Hey, drop the metal. No, that is definitely metal. That's all you're doing is helping me clean this place. Thank you. Well, hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, please consider sharing and subscribing to my channel. I do try and help out with people who are looking to buy these supercars or sell their supercars. Please note that if you ask me questions about specifically buying or selling a supercar, I may not always answer those questions because I get that question a lot, like every day. So that's kind of why I do this consulting stuff, because it takes up too much of my time. So when you guys do need help with those sorts of things, feel free to hire me as a consultant. I will help you out then. But otherwise, I have to protect my time, because if I didn't, I would be doing nothing but answering you guys' questions all day long. That being said, if you do have comments, put them below and I'll try my best to answer all the comments, although I may not answer specific things. So if you have a specific car you're looking at and you say, hey, can you tell me if this is a good value or not? I'm not gonna tell you. That's the exactly kind of stuff that I try and get hired for, all right? Hope you guys understand. If you are interested in any of those sorts of services, go visit my website, normalguysupercar.com, and check out the shopping section. I have all my consultation services listed there. Again, also, if you're selling a supercar, go visit my website, list your car for free, totally free. And if you're browsing for a car, maybe go check out my website again. I am gonna do some videos on some of the cars that are listed on my website soon. So try and get it before then so I can make sure that your car is featured in my video, help you get a sale. And again, no commission, no nothing. Just doing this because I want to help you guys out. All right, guys, we have tons of cool car stuff coming your way. So you're going to want to stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.